1868 ended in an embarrassing defeat for the United States. However, they did manage to sign a weighted treaty in 1868 at Fort Laramie. This treaty guaranteed the Sioux and other natives hunting grounds. However, these lands were not owned by them. They only had land accordingly ceded to them by the United States at their reservations. When gold was discovered in the sacred Cheyenne and Sioux lands of the Black Hills in 1874, prospectors flocked to the area. Grant, unfortunately, at the time, could not stop them from entering this land, but it did give him an opportunity. If prospectors were attacked, he could, with some justification, invade the Sioux lands and take more territory for the United States. Major General Philip Sheridan, a veteran of the United States Civil War and the current commander of the Military Division of the Missouri, had faced off against natives before, notably fighting the Southern Cheyenne, the Comanche, and the Kiowa in devastating winter campaigns. He launched a winter campaign in the Black Hills and the Dakota Territory earlier, although poor U.S. command had led to its abject failure. He would have to wage the Little Bighorn campaign in the summer. U.S. tactics at the time called for swift, forceful attacks from all directions against natives, and these tactics were embraced heavily by Custer and Nelson Miles. Commanders were given relative autonomy on the field. However, this did lead to egos coming into contact with one another, as well as a lot of miscommunication, which happened here at the Little Bighorn. George Armstrong Custer was born in Ohio, but moved to Michigan before he was admitted into the United States Military Academy at West Point. He was wildly popular, nicknamed Audie due to his middle name, but he finished bottom of the class in 1861. He fought multiple campaigns in the Civil War, notably at Gettysburg, where he led the Michigan Wolverines cavalry to check the advance of Jeb Stuart on the Union rear on day 3 of the battle. His actions during the Civil War gave him a brevet major general's rank, but after the war he was stripped of this and returned to his regular commission as a captain. Philip Sheridan, who admired and was a father figure to Custer, gave him the lieutenant colonelcy of the 7th Cavalry in 1866. Custer led the 7th during the battles of the Washita in 1868 and during the Yellowstone River Campaign in 1873. Custer would later command here at the Little Bighorn as part of a 3-pronged assault, part of Terry's column. General Alfred Terry commanded the easternmost column of a 3-pronged assault planned by Sheridan. He struck towards the Sioux village, presumably around Rosebud Creek. He sent Marcus Reno, a detachment forward of the 7th Cavalry, to scout ahead, but they had discovered that on June 17th, the South Prong, commanded by George Crook, had fought a battle at the Rosebud, and the native village had moved. The plan had to be changed very quickly. Marcus Reno, born in Illinois, took 6 years to graduate from West Point due to lots of demerits for lateness. He graduated in 1857, 20th in a class of 38, before being assigned to the 1st Dragoons and sent to Fort Walla Walla in modern-day Washington. In 1862, he and his unit were recalled back for the Civil War, and they were renamed the 1st Cavalry. Reno served multiple administrative roles before enrolling in the 7th Cavalry as a captain in 1871. Reno's home life was very difficult, and his wife died in 1874 while he was on campaign. His commanding officer, General Alfred Terry, refused to let Reno go home, and this led to a lot of distrust between the two, as well as leading to Reno's alcoholism. On June 21st, Terry formed his new plan. Custer would strike southwards towards Rosebud Creek ahead of him and the now arriving western column of Gibbon. The combined camp of Gibbon and Terry was around 752 men, while Custer was given around 650 to strike southward with the 7th Cavalry. Paradoxically, the orders were given free rein to Custer. However, he was given a strict set of guidelines by Terry. This caused, obviously, a lot of confusion in the command structure here during the Little Bighorn campaign, and it would come to bite Custer back. On the 24th of June, Custer camps at Busby Bend, where he is informed by his scouts that the village has moved on. Custer now has a choice. He chooses to advance southward and across the Continental Divide, away from Terry and Gibbon. in the hopes that he can maintain contact with the Indians as well as protecting his own flank. The next day, on June 25th, Lieutenant Charles Varnum and his scouts report back to Custer that they have seen native scouts along the ridge. Varnum and Custer are confused and not sure about the actual location of any troops. Varnum himself did not see anything, but he was reported by native scouts that they had seen Lakota and Cheyenne. Custer decides to press his advantage and he will attack in some sort of surprise attack on the morning. U.S. doctrine heavily favored morning surprise attacks during this time, and it worked with a resounding success at the Washita. He would look to replicate this success against the great Indian village at the Little Bighorn. The village was massive, with 1,000 homes, 7,000 men, women, and children, and 1,800 of whom were warriors. This was the largest gathering of native peoples on the plains since the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. Here on the plains were the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. Specifically of the Lakota, the Hunkpapa, Oglala, Brule, Sans-Arc, and the Maninkaju, all 5 of their main tribes. Custer split his force into multiple parts. The baggage train took 1 of every 6 men in the entire force, while Frederick Benteen, a captain under Custer, was directed southward, along the ridge. Custer proceeded to cross the Continental Divide and move forward. Benteen hated Custer after Custer had lost one of Benteen's friends at the Battle of the Washita. Benteen was sent southward to conduct reconnaissance, and he believed that Custer just wanted him out of the way. This gave him a lack of urgency for the rest of the campaign, which would cause devastation for the rest of the 7th Cavalry. Later at 11:45, Custer makes the decision to split his command yet again, now into 4 parts. Benteen will command companies D, H, and K of 120 men. Captain Marcus Reno will take A, G, and M Company with 175, while Custer himself will take C, E, F, I, and L, a total of 221 men. Captain Thomas McDougal will take Company B, as well as the pack train, a total of 136 men, along with equipment and ammunition. At 2:15 p.m., scouts inform Custer that the Indian village is positioned in the Little Bighorn Valley. Custer decides to advance to contact and begins a trot with Reno and himself. Reno is sent to cross what is now called Reno Creek, named after him, and to strike from the south, while Custer will advance in support from the north. As Reno crosses the creek and advances into the plain behind me, he realizes, after spotting Custer on the bluffs where I am standing, that he needs immediate support. By 3:18, he has now formed a skirmish line. 1 in 4 of his men are horse holders, holding them for their buddies, while he assembles 95 men spread out across to hopefully counter the advancing Indians, who are pouring out of the camp at an alarming rate and outnumbering Reno 5-1. At 3:33, Reno decides to pull back to the timber behind me and form a better defensive position. His men are slowly being overwhelmed and falling, and one is shot next to Reno, spattering blood and brains all over the commander. Reno has been drinking at this point, and the addition of gore on his face isn't helping his mental state, and he slowly begins to deteriorate. The rest of his men also begin to fall back after a fire breaks out in the timber. 11 men are killed, and 5 are wounded so far in the afternoon after an hour's fighting, and Reno's men decide to pull back further in the hopes that they can form an even better defensive situation across the creek. At 3:53, Reno's command entirely breaks, and those who have horses attempt to scramble up these very, very steep ravines in the hopes that they can maintain a position on a ridge. Unfortunately, many of these men are killed on the way up, and they suffer incredible casualties. By 4:10, the total casualties of Reno's detachment are 40 killed in action, 13 wounded, and 17 missing. At 3:30, Custer, who now holds high ground, takes note of 2 things and does a third. First, he takes note of Reno, who by now is still winning and holding. Number 2, he realizes that Cedar Coulee runs into Medicine Creek Coulee. These will lead directly into the Little Bighorn River and provide easy access to the Indian village. The third thing, which he does, is pens a message to Benteen to rush here as soon as possible, even stating that they need to cut the packs if necessary. Custer needs Benteen now, but Benteen doesn't arrive till late. At 3:49, Boston, the youngest Custer brother, arrives at the scene and tells his brother that he has come from the pack train to let him know that Benteen is coming on the pack train as well. Custer also reports to his older brother that Reno is still engaged, giving Custer time to attack the village. At 4:10, Mitch Boyer and Curley, two of Custer's scouts, report back that Reno is in peril and has begun his retreat. Custer panics and divides his command yet again. He sends Captain George Yates with 2 companies down Medicine Trail Coulee, while Miles Keogh is sent towards the position later to be known as Calhoun Hill. Here on Calhoun Hill, Lieutenants Calhoun and Crittenden hold a position where they hope they can survive. Unfortunately for them, they are completely overwhelmed and outmaneuvered. Their lines disintegrate. Calhoun and Crittenden fall behind me as they retreat from the high ground to my left, and they aim to reunite with Custer. Those who retreat are cut to pieces, and the Indians find themselves against Miles Keogh's command, the next to fall. At 4:50, the Indians engaged with Reno wheel away towards the sounds of gunfire coming from Custer's detachment. They slam into the side of Captain Yates and Captain Miles Keogh here. This location is known as Calhoun Hill or Calhoun Ridge, and those who remained here were surrounded and cut to pieces. Likely Crazy Horse was here, and he helped to fell Keogh behind me, who stood with his sergeants and his guidon, while Porter, his other lieutenant, maintained a similar circle nearby. Custer detached Company E, also known as the Gray Horse Company, to aim towards the Little Bighorn River and capture women and children who were retreating away from their village. Unfortunately for them, they were absolutely mauled by native troops surrounding them. They fell back along towards the deep ravine where 28 bodies were later discovered. The rest of them fell, as you can see behind me, as they attempted to break out away and find some sort of hope. By 5:30, the Indians have pushed back Custer, Company F, and the remainder of Keogh's command northwest to what is now Last Stand Hill. Custer orders his men to fire and kill their horses so as to make a makeshift barricade that they can defend themselves against the advancing Indians, who are coming in from all sides. Custer's men slowly begin to run out of ammunition and fight with whatever they can before, after around an hour, they are completely overwhelmed and annihilated. Benteen thankfully arrives to support Reno at 4:30. Reno is relieved, but he is at this point drunk and in a delirious state. He in fact disappears from the battlefield in the search of one of his buddies for an hour. Benteen has no idea where he is. In an attempt to scout, Benteen sends another company of his men along with Captain Thomas Weir ahead in the hopes that he can figure out where Custer is and possibly where Reno has gone himself. The men here begin to dig in and establish a small defensive perimeter by digging with their hands, knives, bayonets, and shovels, of which they only had 3 or 4. They reinforce these rifle pits and the trenches with the bodies of dead horses. Those horses, alive, rest in a swale behind the few hills, and in the center of that are dozens of wounded being attended to by the assistant surgeon, the one man who is left on the field to take care of the sick and the dying. Weir and D Company advance much further than originally Benteen had wanted, and they establish a position here along what is known as Weir Point. Weir spies off in the distance some riders heading towards him and thinks it's Custer coming in to support. However, when he is handed his field glasses by an aide, he realizes that these are thousands of native warriors coming towards his position. Benteen and Reno advance to where Weir is positioned here, but determine that this is not a defensible ground and pull back to where Reno Hill stands today. On the 25th of June, 11 more men are killed or wounded along the heights here where Benteen and Reno had established their command. Attacks in the morning and the afternoon of the 26th are coming more frequently, and 38 become casualties along the heights as the Americans try and hold on and not turn this hill into another Last Stand Hill. While scaling the ravines and trying to overrun the command of Benteen and Reno, a couple of natives are killed, including Long Road behind me, 2 more bodies behind them, and another 2 to my right, including Dog's Backbone of the Minikaju. On the morning of June 26th, the wounded and those survivors here were without water for multiple hours. The 95-degree heat was beating down on them, and so many were absolutely parched. From Lieutenant Edward S. Godfrey, he stated that they put pebbles in their mouths to excite the glands. Some ate grass, but did not find relief. Some tried to eat hard bread, but after chewing for a while, it would blow out of their mouths like flour. Private Jacob Adams of H Company said that the sun beat down on us and we became so thirsty that it was almost impossible to swallow. Benteen asked for volunteers, and a group of around 15 men descended the cliffs and the ravine behind me. They were given water bottles and hoped to get some water in their canteens to bring up to the wounded. They managed to do this multiple times under native fire, while 4 men held a position further to my left and hoped to pin down the Indians as they advanced as well, on Sharpshooter Ridge. Many of these men here were awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions at the Little Bighorn. The U.S. suffers their greatest defeat of the Indian Wars here at the Little Bighorn, with 268 men killed, including Custer and his 2 brothers, Boston and Tom. A total of 6 company commanders, including Tom Custer of Company C, lie dead on the field. 55 men are listed as wounded severely. Native Americans, after the battle, mutilate the bodies of the Americans. This was in accordance with their rituals. They hoped that by mutilating the bodies of the dead, they wouldn't be pursued in the afterlife. Also, they were motivated by revenge. Custer had killed many women and children as well as Indian men at the Battle of the Washita in 1868, and that, paired with many other massacres conducted by U.S. troops, fueled rage that they had to take out in one way or another. Native casualties are much harder to determine. 31 bodies were found, and the locations of those are marked by red granite gravestones, but estimates go as high as 100. 100 is probably way too many, and the United States likely inflated those numbers so as to lessen the blow of the defeat. We can confirm that from native sources that around 150 people were wounded here, but not as many as the U.S.